Oh, you want to heal the world? Oh, you can't do that. You got to elect the right people. No, change your thinking. Change the way you feel. Change the way you do things. Do everything for peace. Like John Lennon said, walk for peace. You take a shower for peace. Do whatever you do for peace. Every time you do that, you set a ripple effect out. Because we live in a vibrational world, and your brain is the instrument. To learn how to direct and control your mind, you guys are superheroes. They don't want you to know that, but you are. You guys are the most powerful people in the world.
We see the power in you to change your thinking. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, only on Freedomizer Radio.
Well, thank you very much for starting off our day here today, Tiger Lily, and I really appreciate your kind words. We all have to do our part, whatever that is, to keep freedom free and rolling, and that's one of the things we do here on Freedomizer Radio. Up next, See the Power in You, yes, with me, Cheryl, See the Power, and my special guest today is going to be Dee Marie, and we're going to be talking about TPP, and I'm certain that many of you have not even heard of this. It's really new in my consciousness, but Dee Marie is going to share what is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, what is a free trade agreement, how big is this agreement, and how many nations does it affect, how much trade, does this deal with just one aspect of trade or more, how will it affect our life in the United States, has Congress been informed, what is fast track, what is this fast track authority that Obama has, and what can we do to stop the TPP? We will also talk about the investor state status and its effect on GMO labeling. I'm going to address all of those questions up next on See the Power in You. Okay, well, Dee Marie is and I'm not going to try to pronounce her name. I'm going to let her do that when she comes on here in a moment. She is a former Congressional Candidate and a community organizer in Orange County, California. She's been a lead organizer for various community events, including the March Against Monsanto. So she was a very busy woman this past weekend. She currently facilitates a coalition of non-GMO organizations in Southern California under the name of GMO Free Orange County. Was working over the weekend on the March Against Monsanto and the World Food Day Festival. And she is currently a team organizer for Expose the TPP USA, a grassroots movement utilizing social media to create awareness and stop TPP and fast track. So welcome in, Dee Marie. Thank you for being here today.
Good morning, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me here. This is one of my favorite things to talk about.
Well, I kind of outlined the questions right before you arrived, what we'll be covering today. So this is obviously, from what I've seen on Facebook, this is obviously a huge deal for you and a very hot topic.
Well, I know that you target the GMO community, and needless to say, this past weekend was, a big event across the world, right? We had our second March Against Monsanto marches, and, we're all concerned about what the GMOs do to us on the health, with our health, and the fact that we want the right to know what's in our food. And the reason that I'm so passionate about the Trans-Pacific Partnership is, and getting the word out about it, is that even if we are successful, and I know with the determination of the non-GMO free movement that we will be successful, and we do get labeling across the board, this partnership is designed so that it will undo everything that the movement has done. That the Monsanto will have the power to basically dissolve any of the labeling initiatives, or if we even get a ban, I mean, they will dissolve that as well. So, and the GMOs is just a very small part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so that's why right now this really has my attention and the attention of a lot of activists, because this quite literally has more power to affect our lives than any piece of legislation currently before our Congress. And so thank you for having me on this morning so we can talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement.
Okay, great. So maybe you could just give us a little bit of an outline of exactly what is this Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement.
Well, this is an agreement between the United States and 11 other countries. We're talking about Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, Vietnam, and now Japan. And it is masquerading as a free trade agreement. So, and you may wonder, like, okay, so what is a free trade agreement? A free trade agreement basically removes impediments to importing and exporting goods. So right now, there is, because we have a certain standard of living and these other countries have another way of living, there is a big difference in the cost of producing goods, right? So naturally, a widget that's made in Vietnam where their minimum wage is $55 a month, and a widget made here in the United States where we may be making, $10 an hour, then basically there's going to be a huge difference in the price of that widget. So if we import a 25-cent widget as opposed to our $5 widget, which one's going to sell? It's going to be the 25-cent widget. So what we normally do is we impose what's called like a tax or a tariff on that 25-cent widget so that it makes it an equal playing field and our manufacturers actually can compete. Well, free trade basically removes those tariffs, and then it's just we've lost the equal playing field. And what we're seeing is more and more of this type of agreement, being made between nations, and of course it's negatively impacting our way of life here in the United States, as well as those competing countries. We don't see it elevating their standards. In fact, if anything, they've just become breeding grounds for basically slave shops or sweatshops.
Yeah.
So basically what we have here is a quote, in quotes, free trade agreement with 11 Pacific Rim nations in the United States. The reason we're concerned is that this trade agreement, which actually started under President Bush, and President Obama has basically picked this up as his personal baby and has been nurturing it, has been secretly negotiated among 600 corporate advisors and the presidents and trade advisors of the participating nations. And it is also open to any country that would agree to the terms. So while China is not currently part of the negotiations, there is a docking agreement that would allow China to become part of it if they agree to abide by all the rules. So basically, the Trans-Pacific Partnership covers about 40% of the global output and approximately one-third of world trade. So why are we concerned? Well, basically, of the 450 pages in the 29 chapters, that have been negotiated in secret. And I'm going to say that over and over again, because the concern around this is the lack of transparency. Only 5 chapters that we know of actually deal with trade. The rest of it basically are mystery chapters or administrative. They really deal with policy that benefits multinational corporations like Monsanto. You know, the evil corporate giant that the non-GMO free movement is battling for our right to know what's in our food. So basically, Cheryl, our Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 gives sole authority for negotiating international trade to our Congress. It does not give it to the executive branch. This is only a recent development since about the time of Nixon. And then, of course, we have been living with the aftermath of NAFTA, which was passed under the watch of President Clinton. And so we know what has happened to our country since we became involved in the World Trade Organization, as well as signing and agreeing to NAFTA. So basically, we've lost 5 million U.S. jobs that have been offshored to countries with cheap labor. And it's also put us in the position of being sued by the multinational corporations for any of our legislation that they deem would cause them a loss of potential profits. So, you know, not only have we lost 5 million jobs, 45,000 manufacturing plants have closed in the United States. You know, we have a situation where 1 out of 3 Americans cannot afford their basic necessities. What has happened to our American dream? It's basically turned into the American nightmare. And the TPP has been called NAFTA on steroids because it's so all-encompassing, and it affects, as I said, such a large portion of the global trade. And what it concerns us now, it's not just our manufacturing that's being offshored. Jobs are now being sent to China that include IT, engineering, research and development, computer programming, accounting, and other white-collar jobs. So this basically is really a huge punch in the face of middle-class America. And that's basically what Representative Alan Grayson said when he finally, after months and months of pressuring the U.S. Trade Representative Office to see the draft text of the TPP, you know, he was allowed in, no notes, no camera. He had to swear that he would not divulge the actual contents of what he was reading. And when he was done, that's what he said. He said he could totally understand why it was called NAFTA on steroids, that it was a huge punch in the face of the American middle class, and that basically it would dismantle our democratic process.
Okay. DeMarie, now, TPP is really new to me. It's really new to my awareness and my consciousness. And I don't understand NAFTA and what it has done already. Can you explain to our audience a little bit about NAFTA and what it's done for those who are brand new to all of this?
Okay, well, basically, the spin that was fed to the American public was that NAFTA would create 200,000 new American jobs through increased exports. But basically what has happened is because we have removed the tariffs, nearly 1 million U.S. jobs have been sent to Mexico for lower wages. Also, we have exported to Mexico, which has caused the demise of thousands of Mexican farms, which has created a surge of immigrants to the United States who are desperate to find work. So we're looking at trade imbalances in fruits and vegetables that have tripled within 5 years of NAFTA and has contributed to the demise of 170,000 American farms. It's over a 20% decrease. So what we see is that, 2008 was a huge financial debacle for our country. Mm-hmm. And so we went into a recession. And 60% of the jobs that were lost in that recession were middle-income jobs. And we keep hearing about, it's getting better, the economy's coming back. But what they fail to tell us is that 59% of the new positions that are opening during this economy are in low-wage industries. They're in retail, food services, cleaning, and healthcare support. And what's really, really scary, Cheryl, is that with the continuation of these, quote, free trade agreements, by 2020, 48% of our jobs will be jobs in those low-wage sectors that I just mentioned. So what has happened to our country, and I think we're all well aware of this, is that we now have one of the highest income, wealth, and quality of any nation in the developed world. The working class wages have stagnated. In fact, it has not kept up with inflation. The minimum wage that's being paid today has less value than the minimum wage that was being paid in 1963. However, the incomes of the 1% has skyrocketed. So while we have 1 out of 3 Americans not able to cover their basic necessity, Wall Street had a sizzling good summer in 2013. J.P. Morgan, $6.5 billion, and this is just second quarter profits. Okay, this is not yearly. This is a second quarter profit for 2013. J.P. Morgan has $6.5 billion, Goldman Sachs $1.93 billion, Citicorp $4.8 billion, and Bank of America $4.1 billion. And these are profits were partly achieved by cutting American jobs. So let's talk again about the GMOs and what we've been doing. We are attempting to get right-to-know labeling in all 50 states so that the consumer can go to the grocery store and know if our corn, if our soybean, if our salmon is laden with GMOs. We have a right to know, don't you think that, Cheryl?
Absolutely. We focus on the whole labeling issue, food safety, et cetera, here on CthePower 4 days a week. So, yes,
exactly.
Very much aware.
So, but basically what's going to happen is that if this is approved, as I said earlier, what this does is it elevates the multinational corporations like Monsanto to what we call investor state status, meaning they have more power than the participating nations, and they can sue the entire nation over laws and policies that they deem cause loss of future profits. So let's look what happened to the United States under NAFTA. We have paid out over $350 million to foreign investors because of our health and safety laws, and also our timber laws. We're also looking at possibly paying out another $12 billion. That's billion with a B in pending claims against our environmental safety or public health safety policies. Guess who pays for that? That's you and me. That's our tax dollars that are basically being shoved into the pockets of these multinational corporations because we want to protect our citizens. Now, who gets to rule during these, rule on these particular lawsuits? It's not our Supreme Court. It's not any of the courts in the countries. They're called global tribunals, which basically are made up of corporate attorneys. Pretty scary.
You got me scared. I can feel it I can feel this knot in my stomach starting to grow.
Well, I'm hoping that it grows, and I'm hoping that it grows in the stomach of all your listeners, because really the only way that we're going to stop this is by getting involved. And we'll talk a little bit more about that after we finish talking about the impact that the TPP will have on us. Okay. So, yes, my job is to make people feel uncomfortable. We should be uncomfortable. We should be angry that our government is doing this behind closed doors, and that our Congress, who has been charged by the Constitution to negotiate our trade agreements, are being kept in the dark, that there is not transparency in this process. So I'm hoping that your listeners are getting angry, because that's what propels us into motion and into action. So, let's talk about how these investor state rights have really impacted. Mexican tuna fishing fleets filed a suit against the U.S. in the World Trade Tribunal over our dolphin-safe tuna labeling. Now, I don't know about you, but I always, when I purchase my tuna, I always look for dolphin-safe labeling.
Yes.
Well, because the Mexican fishing fleet's nets are not dolphin safe, this was perceived as a trade barrier. And in 2012, the Global Tribunal ruled against the United States. U.S. drug giant Eli Lilly is suing Canada for $500 million because they worked within their law to deny patents to two of Eli Lilly's most expensive medicines, which they consider a trade barrier under NAFTA. Indonesia filed a case against the U.S. in the World WTO Tribunal over the Congress-passed 2010 Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, which banned their clove cigarette imports because they were thought to entice young smokers. The World Trade Organizational Tribunal decided against the United States, recommending that our policy be changed. While I've been researching this, I also found out, this really, really upset me. A lot of what happened in 2008 on Wall Street was a result of the fact that Congress repealed what was a piece of legislation known as the Glass-Steagall Act. So maybe you're familiar with that. Some of your listeners have heard about that. Basically, what the Glass-Steagall Act did was prevent the banks from using depositors' money for speculative investment. So when they repealed that, the bank started playing with depositors' money, got us into a situation where we ended up having to, bail out the too big to fail banks, right? Well, Cheryl, did you know that Glass-Steagall was repealed because it violated the terms of the agreements of the financial regulations in NAFTA?
Oh.
This is what is happening to our legislation. This basically what these agreements do is it ties the hands of Congress. What's the point of having a Congress if when they pass legislation, these multinational corporations can come right around and sue them or pass regulations that nullify the protections that they've put in place for us. So, basically what we have here is we have a concern over the loss of our jobs. What we see is that the United States is investing in China and in Vietnam in their universities so that they can go ahead and have well-educated workforce in these countries that pay much less than what we pay here in the United States. So basically, by 2010, 1 in 3 U.S. companies had planned to invest in more expansion in Vietnam. And remember, I said Vietnam has a minimum wage of $55 per month. We can't barely live on that in a day in the United States. And they're talking, this is what they live on in a month. So how do we compete? Let's talk about food safety. 2/3 of our fruit and vegetables and 90% of our seafood is imported into the United States. Did you know that the FDA only inspects 1 to 2% of our imported foods for freshness, condition, radiation, contaminants, and other toxins? So how does this impact us? Well, for the summer of 2013, 4 U.S. multi-state outbreaks of foodborne illness were attributed to imported foods. More than 850 illnesses, 122 hospitalizations, and 1 death. So many of Chinese farms and food processing factories are in areas where water and soil are contaminated by industrial pollution and waste.
Yes.
They have extremely poor safety and hygiene standards in food and manufacturing. And many of these nations, participating nations, allow questionable and unsafe food additives and toxic dyes in their food. They also use many of the chemicals that we ban in our farming. So they're also finding. Go ahead.
One of the things that I came across in the study of genetically modified foods is that DDT has been banned in this country for years. I don't know, even remember in my brain how long it's been banned in this country, and it's showing up in the cord blood of our pregnant women. So
which means they're ingesting the food.
They're ingesting it from food that's being imported from other countries that don't have the restrictions on DDT that we do. And the other issue that has come up most recently is the food safety as it relates to poultry and meat processing. The plans, the guidelines that have been set up from the FDA and the USDA failed in more than half of the worst plants in the United States were on this new plan, these new guidelines. And we are going to be now importing chicken from China, where their food safety regulations are much, much lower than ours. And the worst part is that it's because it's processed chicken, it won't have to have labels for country of origin.
Yeah. So basically, with the passage of these free trade agreements, our supermarkets carry more imported foods from partner nations that don't meet U.S. food safety standards, and potentially with no requirements to label, as you said, Cheryl, the food country of origin. So, you're a consumer. You go to the store. I read labels all the time. You know, I mean, it takes me like 3 times as long to shop now than it did when my kids were small, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's just because we now, as consumers, the responsibility rests on us. I mean, we really don't have the FDA or the USDA doing their job. Why? Because President Obama has put former Monsanto employees in charge of these government agencies. We basically have the fox guarding the hen house. So if your consumers are going grocery shopping and they're not checking the labels, I feel sorry for them. Yeah. This is now a responsibility for us. We can no longer trust our government to do what is right for us. They now are in the pockets of the multinational corporation. They legislate to the benefits of these corporations, not to the benefit of we the people. So, so we talked about food. Let's talk about the environment. That's very important. I live in I'm about 50 minutes away from LA. Mm-hmm. And, there was a time when you couldn't see the LA skyline because of the pollution. It was so bad. But, we came in, we put in protections, and slowly the pollution started to dissipate and the air quality got better. Mm-hmm. Well, now, under the expansion of these free trade agreements, and especially the TPP, these companies could come in and again sue us for our environmental regulations, saying that it's going to cause them to lose potential profits. So basically, it could.
I didn't think about
right,
that.
It could obliterate our environmental prophecies and policies. Yeah, I'm prophesying what's going to happen. So basically, we will be reduced, the United States, our policies will be reduced to the lowest environmental standards of the participating nations. So, basically, again, people say, well, give me an example. Okay, here's an example. Ecuador sued Chevron for $19 billion for dumping 16 billion gallons of toxic waste into their water from 1970 to the 1990s. It created a zone of birth defects and high cancer rates and damaged the Amazon rainforest. And we all know how important the Amazon rainforest is. That is the lungs of the planet. It's what keeps this planet, the ecosystem, in balance. Well, Chevron turned around and countersued Ecuador, alleging that lack of due process afforded in the trial violated its rights as an investor, demanding payback for any fines paid under the contamination lawsuit. This is the kind of thing that can happen. We have BP. We saw the mess they made in the Gulf. Okay? Mm-hmm. With their elevated status of investor state, they could turn around and sue the United States and say, we want all the money that we put in, to clean up this mess. We want that money back. I mean, this is ridiculous. Why should they be elevated to the state of nation? They are a corporation. They are a business. You either take control of your business to make a profit. You don't go after the nations that are trying to protect their people. Now, another aspect of the Trans-Pacific Partnership that your listeners are probably going to be very interested in knowing is that it also encompasses the pharmaceutical industry. Okay. In 2012, Americans spent over $325 billion on prescriptions. A lot of this is on generic. Okay. So 84% of prescriptions were generics. So that shows you, why do we go to generic? Because generic is what?
cheaper.
It's less expensive. Yeah, exactly. So in 2011, 45% of adult Americans that did not have prescription coverage did not fill their prescriptions due to cost. So what can happen under the TPP is basically they're trying to put policy in place that would extend the life of their patents. I think right now the average patent is about 20 years. So once that expires, then it goes into the generic form.
Oh.
Okay, when HIV first hit, right? And we had the patented drugs, it cost a patient $10,000 a year to have their medications for HIV. Now with generic, do you know how much it costs a patient now with the generic drugs?
No.
$120 a year.
Wow.
Okay, so now this becomes affordable, and many more people can have protected lives because the medication is affordable. Now with these new policies under the TPP, they want to extend the patents for something as simple as a change of indication. In other words, they're not going to change anything on the molecular level. Let's say they discovered that, oh, this drug is good for headaches. Oh, great, let's extend, because we have a new use for it, let's extend the patent. So can you see how by having these kind of policies in place that the average American or any of the citizens of these participating nations are going to be adversely affected? We won't be able to afford our medications. So it's scary because 1 in 3 Americans are on long-term prescription drug, and more than half are on 2, and 20% of Americans are more than 5 or more. Maybe we should stop eating GMOs and we won't need as many drugs. Right? So,
what's frightening to me as you're speaking is that we have been living with the unintended consequences of these actions by people who do not have to, they aren't affected. They aren't personally affected by these issues. And I'm just going to use a really goofy example. You go to the grocery store, and on your way out, there's a little pile of cool little toys that cost 98 cents. And if you look at that little toy that costs 98 cents, and you look at how many screws are there and how many little parts there are and what it would actually take to get it, put it together, then you start, if you've ever seen any of those, any of the videos from Japanese or Chinese factories where people are making $55 a month, they're living in tight little quarters in apartments provided by the factory, living 5, 6, 10 people in an apartment. They're having to eat at cafeterias that are supplied by the factory because they can't afford to go into the marketplace and feed themselves. And when you buy that one little widget thing for 98 cents, that's what you're supporting. And they're going to take away the tariffs that bring those prices up. So now what's going to happen? We're going to have them for 5 cents, and everybody's going to want 20 of them?
Well, you make a good point, Cheryl. And it's not just the little 98 cents toy. I mean, many of the things that we've come to depend upon, our computers and our iPhones and whatever, are being made in those same conditions. And I had this debate last weekend with a person who advocated on free trade agreement. And he goes, well, look, we're giving these people jobs. I go, what kind of jobs are we giving them? It's basically slave labor. They're so unhappy, they're jumping from the roofs. They're trying to kill themselves. Let's think about this. We're not against, we realize that the world is a global village. Sure. And that we have to have global trade. But what we're saying is let's have fair trade, not free trade. Let's elevate these third world countries to the standard of living that we have. Let's not take the standard of living of the United States and reduce it to the standards of these third world countries. And folks, that's exactly where we're going if we don't stop the TPP, if we don't stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So basically, I'm looking at the time, and I don't want us to run out of, there's so much more that the TPP involves, but just basically, I just want to hit on a few other things. One of the ways that we're trying to come back from the recession is that many people are buying American. We understand that in order to get this economy back up and running, we have to support our U.S. entrepreneurs and our manufacturing, and we buy American. I will spend a couple dollars more to buy a U.S.-made product than to buy it from another country. We've got to get our economy back, right? So we have these initiatives called Buy American. Well, under the TPP, that we will no longer be able to have a Buy American initiative. Our U.S. government will no longer be able to give priority to their contract awards to U.S. companies. We're talking about basically companies from other countries having equal access to U.S. government procurement. That's not fair. But how does that help our country? So, also our Internet. We love our Internet. In fact, if you remember, not long ago, we went to all sorts of lengths to lobby Congress so that they would not pass SOPA, which was the Stop Online Piracy Act. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And so, we put an end to that. Well, hello, folks. The TPP is a backdoor to an attack on our Internet freedom. SOPA is back. So basically, what they want to be able to do is, right now, many of us will, you see a recipe on somebody's website, and we copy it, and we send it to Aunt Jane, right? We're not making a dime off of that. Well, that is some sort of form of piracy, but it's been accepted that we can do that. Well, under TPP, you won't be able to do that. That will be considered a gross violation, and you're going to get your hands slapped.
Or worse.
And if you do that enough times, you'll be blocked. So, just the fact we will not be able to use the Internet the way that we are able to do it now. So, basically as a recap, not only is that our Internet, our medicine, our environmental health laws are attacked, and financial regulations will be gone. We will not be able to buy America only. We're going to continue to have our job loss. There'll be continuing gaps in our income equality. All of this, thank you, TPP.
Okay, so we've got 15 minutes here and probably like 10, so we can slip in a nice proclamation here at the end. And what can people do? Because this sounds too big for me.
Right. It is too big for just one of us, but it's not too big for all of us. We just had an example of how Americans coming together in a united front, we were able to stop the United States from going to war on Syria. That was because we put pressure on our Congress. Okay? The phone calls they were coming in left and right. Alan Grayson said the phone calls coming in 100 to 1. We do not want war. We are fed up with war. No more. So they couldn't do it. The will of the people, right? They had to find some other way of dealing with that situation. So we are basically dealing with a war right now, and this is a war of the 1% and the multinational corporations against the average person, you and me. And so we need to band together just like we did with the war in Syria, and we have to put pressure on Congress. So here's what's going to happen. These trade agreements do not stand alone. They don't stand well at all. If Congress starts to get into them and really start examining them, they see how detrimental they are, and they're not going to pass them. So what they came up with, what the executive branch came up with, and this was with Nixon, is they came up with a tool called Fast Track, whereby the executive branch negotiates the trade agreement, gets it signed, and they bring it back to Congress. Congress has a limited amount of time to review it, or practically no amount of time to debate it, and they cannot amend it at all. All they can do is vote it up or down. That's how NAFTA got passed, by means of Fast Track. When President Obama was running for president, he said he would never use Fast Track. It was not constitutional. Well, now we have President Obama, who is working his way to try to make this TPP happen, and now he is petitioning our U.S. Congress for Fast Track. Only now it's called a new name called Trade Promotional Authority, or TPA. So the first thing we have to do, and we need to do it this week, even though the government is shut down, they're still working, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
And they're passing legislation. So we don't know when this is going to come before Congress. So we need to be calling our U.S. representatives and our senators and telling them no on Fast Track, no on Trade Promotional Authority. We want our Congress to do the job that we're paying them $174,000 a year for. We want them to dissect this trade agreement. We want them to amend it if it needs to be amended in our favor. We do not want them voting it yes or no without having time to debate it or amending it. Does that make sense, Cheryl?
It absolutely makes sense. And the way that you explained it to me earlier when we talked on the phone is that with Fast Track, Obama can go up and make all the backdoor deals he wants to, bring it to Congress and say you have to say yes or no, and you have no option to amend it.
That's correct. And it's not just TPP. He's doing the same thing with the European Union. There are more free trade agreements in the chute coming down. So the first campaign in this attack of trying to save our country is to call Congress. Number is 202-224-3121. I've got that number memorized. 202-224-3121. That is the Congressional switchboard. You call it, you ask for your U.S. representative, and you tell them that we want them to do their job. We do not want Fast Track. No on Fast Track. That's number one. Then you tell them no on TPP. No on Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. There are a lot of organizations out there that people can go to for information. One is exposethetpp.org. Another is flushthetpp.org. www.tpp.org. And if your listeners are on Facebook, as you told them, we actually have a national grassroots movement on Facebook where they can hook up with their neighbors so that they can work together to go see their congresspeople, to have in-home teach-ins. You know, we put a PowerPoint together, and they have access to it online for free. They can put it up on their TV screen and invite their neighbors over for a potluck meal and explain to them what is going on so that they can get their neighbors involved. This has got to be a grassroots movement because the media is not going to talk about it. They're owned by the multinational corporations. So you want to go to www.facebook.com/exposethetpp.usa. So it all runs together. All right? So,
well,
again.
I'm going to make a suggestion right here, Marie. If you have listened to this program today and you don't understand all the details, that's not important. The important thing is to put the pressure on your congressman, on your state representatives. Call them and just tell them, no, I don't want it. Flood them with calls of, no, I don't want it. You don't have to know the details. And that's the power of the people. That's the power of a phone call. Because one phone call multiplied by thousands will flood their offices and they will have to listen.
That's right. That's right.
Then dig in deeper if you want to know more with all of the website and everything that Dee Marie has outlined for you, to go out there and really be able to talk about it with your neighbors and get them excited. Pass this program along to them so that they know the dire consequences, the unintended consequences of these trade agreements. And I just want to thank you so much for everything that you've been doing to raise awareness on this really important topic. I'm just...
Well, Cheryl, I thank you for allowing me to come on and share about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Again, it is being negotiated in secret, and this is why we don't know about it. So nobody should feel bad that they don't know about it. It's been done on purpose because the policies are so bad for the average American and so good for the multinational corporations, they don't want people to know what's going on. But we do have trade watch organizations out there, citizenstrade.org. A lot of the consumer watch organizations are on this. And as you said, all it takes is really getting on the Internet, doing a search under Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. I would put dangers of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and all of these websites will come up, okay? And if you value your life and you wanted to see it maybe even improve, since we all kind of took a hit in 2008, we want to go back to pre-2008. If you're concerned about your children and your grandchildren, and that's where my concern is. I've got 2 grown children. One of them has a child on the way. I am very concerned about what's happening to our food supply, what's happening to our freedoms, and our quality of life. So please, I just urge all of your listeners, like you said, Cheryl, you don't have to understand every bit of it. It's huge. It's monumental. It's 450 pages. But we do know what the effects will be. And that's what we want to stop. And we have the power if we all unite together. As you said, see the power. We have it. Let's take it. Let's go to work.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, Dee Marie. I really, really appreciate it. And all the work, the hard work.
Thank you.
Are you out here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, you've been listening. I know you have, and we have a need for a powerful proclamation this morning, and send a ripple out into the universe?
Well, we all know that the life that we live here in this dimension has to do with the game of separation. And we know that when we've been raised in society where we've been told it's unacceptable to lie, cheat, and steal, then as we mature and grow up, we find out that in society, who really is guilty of some and all of these things, and the con artists, actually the team that we think that is supposed to be helping us, is actually fighting against us, where, so the thing that we have to remember, nobody can take away our protection, our creation, our desires, our health, or anything unless we allow it. So it's time to reclaim all of our creations, and this one's about sabotage. So from the divine love within my being, I take myself back to a point in time just prior to the events, creating conditions in which my creative energies were compromised or sabotaged in any manner. I call forth all records and memories of these events and transmute them into the divine expression of creative love and erase them from universal consciousness. I reclaim all my thought forms and creative expressions, compromised, stolen, or sabotaged throughout the journey of my soul, with or without my permission on all levels of consciousness, and I now transmute them into the divine expression of creative love. I call forth all energies within my being on all levels of consciousness, magnetically attracting sabotage or similar energies into my experience, and I transmute them into the divine expression of creative love. I claim responsibility and dominion over all my creative expressions according to my heart's desire in peace, joy, love, and harmony. And so it is, and amen, so be it.
All right. And I'm going to take you all out with a little reminder here of what this country was made
can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose sparks rise in bright